Hi guys, I publish many novels in our Telegram. Each novel has its own exclusive Telegram channel packed with all chapters in high-quality audio. Plus, if the novel is ongoing, you'll get all future updates and releases automatically, no extra cost, no monthly payment. Just make a one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi and enjoy unlimited access forever. Don't miss out on the ultimate audiobook experience. Links in the description. If you can't support me financially, just like and subscribe our videos. Thank you guys, your support means a lot. And as always, enjoy Shadow. Chapter 201. Uninvited Intruder. Did I really teach you this type of magic? Opening her mouth in amazement, the dark spiritualist marveled as I showed her some of the spells she would create in the future. At some point, we stopped drinking coffee and started sipping wine. Seeing her tipsy appearance, which was different and yet faintly familiar, put me at ease. She always felt regretful that she couldn't drink even when there was alcohol around because she was a ghost. Wow, I'm really amazing. Anyway, seeing this familiar goofy side of hers made me miss the original dark spiritualist. Most dark mages know about you. I also heard that Dante tried to recruit you, but failed. That's how it should be. There's no way they wouldn't have sent me an invitation. She bobbed her head smugly, showing that she was satisfied with the future. Since she was holed up in her lab during this period, her need for recognition was certainly exceptional. Watching the dark spiritualist, who was now in a good mood, tilt her glass, I asked the same question again. So, what was the reason that made you so determined to learn necromancy? She dodged the question before, saying she forgot. This time, maybe because she had some drinks or just remembered, she answered me without much hesitation. Have you heard the story of the child who wished for Lemegeton? Yes. It was the story of a girl who wished to meet her mother, who had died early. She then received Lemegeton from the demon Lord Laric. It is similar to that situation. My parents died when I was very young. Clink. The dark spiritualist shook her glass slightly. The emotion reflected in her eyes was different from that of mere longing. They told me not to worry and promised they'd always be by my side, even after death. At first, I was curious. Are my parents' souls really with me? The beginning of the girl's path to becoming a necromancer was quite both tragic and simple. Then, I learned about Lemegeton's story, that there was a child just like me. Suddenly, a feeling of doubt arose within me. The dark spiritualist was talking as if she were referring to someone else. But wasn't she the descendant of that girl? Does she not know about it yet at this point? Thinking that might be the case, I propped my chin and focused on listening to her story again. So, while searching for Lemegeton, I started learning necromancy. A slight blush, which was visible through the semi-transparent black veil, appeared on her face. But do you know what's funny? What is it? With a self-mocking smile, the dark spiritualist answered indifferently. I had forgotten about it until just now. That's right. Yes, I started learning necromancy to see my parents. It's really funny. However, despite her words, there was no great emotional upheaval. It was not uncommon that when someone ran hard, they would start forgetting the direction they were actually headed. It was similar to the cliches where someone initially aimed to earn money for the sake of their family, only to have money become the sole purpose of their lives. The more I learned, the more I thought it was because I wasn't good enough that I still couldn't see my parents. At some point, it no longer became important. I simply found learning necromancy enjoyable. It was like getting addicted to a drug. I see. The more I listened to her story, the more it felt like she was giving a confession. Was it the same for the dark spiritualist? She rolled up her sleeves and showed her pale wrist. There were scars from multiple needle marks on it. The blood of the child who received Lemegeton from demon Lord Laric flows within me. I know. You are that child's descendant. Hee. Is that how the future me explained it? The drunk dark spiritualist shook her head. That child never married or had children. Oh. I didn't understand what she meant by that, but the dark spiritualist continued explaining. When I found the child's corpse, it seemed she harbored a lot of resentment. She wandered around, wailing with intense sorrow. Her obsession with life was so strong that even after hundreds of years, her corpse hadn't decayed because of her soul. Before entering the Dream Demon Manor, I remembered talking with the dark spiritualist about it. When I asked her if she was truly the descendant of the child who received Lemegeton, her expression turned quite dark at the time. I tried to control the child who had transformed into a vengeful evil spirit, but I failed. She was too powerful and left me with no choice but to annihilate her. Then, her gaze slowly moved from the wine glass to me. That's right. I transplanted all of the child's blood into myself. It took me about a year. I could hardly speak. The extent of her obsession with necromancy made my skin crawl. Why did you do such a thing? Why would the dark spiritualist, who was not even a cadavermancer, inject the child's blood into herself. As if it was obvious, she forced a laugh. Because I didn't know how Lemegeton recognizes its master, this was a foundation I laid so I could handle it better when I eventually obtained it. I couldn't find any words. I began to understand why the dark spiritualist hid her past from me so thoroughly. So how is it? Do you find me repulsive now? There were times when people had asserted that the dark spiritualist was much more vile than I knew. I didn't receive any clear explanation back then, but hearing it directly from her now, my view of you has changed. Now, I fully realized that the dark spiritualist had walked a path completely opposite to mine. I feel sorry for my future self. Despite her words, she continued drinking her wine as if she felt refreshed after confessing everything. Then, she glanced at me as if she had at least found some relief. But it's a relief, right? You noticed, didn't you? It was a brief silence. Suddenly, the dark spiritualist's previously tranquil gaze as she stared at me sharpened like a blade honed on a whetstone. We both slowly reached for our staves beside us. The mana between us, like boiling water, was slowly but steadily heating up, clearly preparing to be directed at each other. However, crash, the door to the dining hall burst open and Hanzo rolled in along with debris. Before a day had passed, the golden shield we gave him had already split in half. He embraced the heavenly oath martial staff tightly as if to protect it. The dark spiritualist and I both turned our gaze to the entrance. A moment ago, we resembled Wild West gunslingers ready to draw our revolvers towards each other, not tolerating any interference. However, now we pointed our staves towards the entrance, where a woman stood dragging 6 corpses. Luaneth. Among them we could see a small corpse. My eyes were drawn to Luaneth, whose once radiant blonde hair had been completely pulled out. That boy was the one who nearly brought the Griffin Kingdom to its destruction as Herald Hazard, who then formed the organization called Dante to save the continent with black magic. As I took in the sight of his corpse, a faint disturbance arose within me, but my expression remained unchanged. When I remembered Mull from room 109, who mentioned we'd meet later before committing suicide, I started to question if this place, the Dream Demon Manor, was real. Careful. Those corpses she has aren't ordinary. Hanzo hurriedly pulled himself together and assumed a defensive stance. However, the dark spiritualist voiced a question. What's going on here? Isn't everyone supposedly staying in their rooms? And yet, they were still all killed by this woman. The cadavermancer giggled with a chilling laugh. However, upon seeing Mull's corpse, I roughly understood the situation. So, you sent in those corpses. After all, the dead weren't bound by rules. 24. When a guest dies, the room they occupied will be opened. However, until then, entry is forbidden even with permission from the room owner. This meant corpses were simply regarded as objects. It was easy to guess how she infiltrated the rooms and killed the other guests. Hi. Hi. So many quality corpses. This place must be heaven for real. As the woman laughed and looked around at us, her expression suddenly hardened. Then, 6. She counted the number of corpses she was controlling. Her thin fingers, which were marked by stitched scars, pointed at Hanzo. 7. Then at the dark spiritualist. 8. Next at me. 9. She continued counting with herself. 10. Finally, the stupid big guy. She even counted Jortu, who had already died on the 4th floor. 11. A chilling silence fell. The cadavermancer, who had been counting people with her finger, scratched her chin and posed a question. But there are only 10 rooms? From room 101 to room 110. There were a total of 10 guests invited, yet when we counted, there were 11 people. Huh! Surprised, Hanzo also counted the present people himself before stepping back as a cold shiver ran down his spine. Our rule number 27. So, there's an uninvited intruder here? 27. Guest rooms only go up to number 110. There is no room 111. If you find room 111 and someone is staying in it, kill them immediately. They are an uninvited intruder. Who is it? Bewildered, Hanzo began to back away, warily eyeing us. This was why I didn't say anything earlier. Because if I had spoken earlier, our newly formed group would have quickly fallen apart. I met the dark spiritualist's gaze. She shrugged, but her expectant eyes made me open my mouth. When we listed out all the rules, there were several confusing points. The Dream Demon Manor had many rules. They seemed sloppy, and yet held an air of absolute authority. The ambiguously written rules seemed to urge us to somehow use them as if they were keys to solving a mystery. Well, actually, the rules of the Dream Demon Manor had indeed become the key to solving this case. I, Deus Verdi, am staying in room 110. I came from the farthest future. Mull was staying in room 109. Mull came from a time period right before mine. The Cadavermancer is staying in room 108. I saw her crawling towards room 108 after being beaten by Jortu. Jortu, who has died, was staying in room 107. What does that matter? Hanso asked hesitantly, but I calmly recalled Hanso and Jortu's first meeting. Jortu, upon seeing you, war god Hanso, said that you were a middle-aged person. The Hanso I know of is quite a middle-aged man. From Jortu's time, Hanso must have been middle-aged. So, if we assume that Hanso, who lives in Jortu's time, is at most 14 years old. Suddenly realizing his age and trying to figure out each room's time, Hanso stood there with his mouth agape. He seemed to follow the conversation well enough. Me, who is staying in room 110, Hanso died at the age of 85 in my time. Hanso's reaction to learning about his death was quite amusing, but that wasn't the important part. Thus, there is a gap of about 36 years between room 107 and room 110. Considering that middle age was around 4,049 years old, even if there were an error, the difference would not be extremely significant. Here comes the question. I glanced slightly at the dark spiritualist and saw that she was actually enjoying my explanation. The dark spiritualist I know of is at most 30 years old. Yet, there is at least a 36-year gap between me and Jortu in room 107. Hanso seemed to have been overwhelmed, trying to catch up however. The Cadavermancer's eyes gleamed as if she had found the answer. While I didn't know her exact age in my time, the dark spiritualist was either my age or a year or two older. A year later, I would be 29 years old. However, the dark spiritualist in front of me was 18 years old. Jortu in room 107. I spoke like the Cadavermancer in room 108. A judge delivering a verdict. Mull in room 109, who was calmly tapping the gavel. Deus Verdi in room 110, and delivering the final judgment. According to rule number 11 of the Dream Demon Manor. 11. Guests with higher room numbers come from later time periods. The uninvited intruder in this manor was, if you are truly an invited guest, you would have been assigned a room between room 107 and room 110. The 18-year-old dark spiritualist. It was you. Chapter 202. Cleaning period. If you are truly an invited guest, you would have been assigned a room between room 107 and room 110. Following that single remark, a heavy silence descended over the dining hall. Hanso and the Cadavermancer's gazes pierced through the dark spiritualist, silently asking if she had any rebuttal to my accusation. Instead, the dark spiritualist ignored their gazes and simply raised the corners of her mouth slightly as she looked in my direction. I did think that the rules of the Dream Demon Manor were quite foolish, but it turns out I ended up tripping like this. It wasn't wrong. The biggest problem was that we did not know what penalty awaited us for breaking these rules. Guests were only permitted to go up to the 3rd floor. However, when we went up to the 4th floor, nothing prevented us from doing SP. That just showed how lax everything was. Really? Are you really the uninvited intruder mentioned in rule number 27? Hanso shouted exaggeratedly, but the Cadavermancer simply bobbed her chin once. At the same time, the 6 corpses shot out and began to surround the dark spiritualist with eerie movements. Do you think someone like you can kill me? Even though everyone in the dining hall had now turned into enemies, the dark spiritualist remained calm. No, she raised her purple eyes coldly, like a just awakened savage beast. You, a lowly creature who crawls around, is trying to take down someone as superior as me? The small staff she in her hand began to swirl with purple mana, which soon transformed into screaming evil spirits. Cadavermancers are just like necromancers. Of course, without corpses I could just crawl. The Cadavermancer readily admitted that she had fled at the slightest sign of the dark spiritualist, but was boldly declaring that things were different now. The two were on the verge of starting a battle. However, I gave them a warning as I poured wine into the glass on the table. You are running out of time. Please fight in moderation. The 2 dark mages stared at me in disbelief, but I savored the moment, relishing their incredulous gazes as I sipped my wine. Although I wasn't particularly fond of alcohol, the wine here was top-shelf liquor, difficult for even the royal family to procure. The Dream Demon Manor was filled with such things. Everything glittered splendidly outside the manor, with precious things scattered on the ground like stones. One just had to live here for a few days for their concept of luxury to disappear. Shouldn't we fight together? With whom? Hanso trembled in an exaggerated manner as he held up his heavenly oath martial staff, sticking his head out idiotically and taking a deep breath. To answer my question about with whom we should fight, he was caught in a dilemma, alternating between the dark spiritualist and the Cadavermancer. As per rule number 27, the one we had to fight was the dark spiritualist. However, the Cadavermancer had killed all the other guests and she would probably kill us as well. Both choices were unpleasant to make. Therefore, I just planned to watch their battle while tilting my glass. Kwang. While Hanso was hesitating, the dark spiritualist made the first move. Kaya Ek. She pushed the evil spirits she controlled towards the corpses, releasing their resentment. For a moment, it seemed like the cadavermancer was being pushed back. However, this is why the corpses in this place are so good. While the cadavermancer certainly played a part in killing them, all the guests at the Dream Demon Manor were big shots. Hence, the quality of the corpses themselves were indeed quite excellent. The corpses she now possessed were not inferior compared to the dark spiritualist's evil spirits. The situation was tense. To further elaborate, the person who introduced a variable would win, and the cadavermancer was the first to make an attempt. The cadavermancer held a white dagger and a crystal skull in her hands. The dagger was a gift I had given Luaneth, and the crystal skull seemed like a tool the cadavermancer would enjoy using. These are the rewards I obtained from attacking guests. Did she choose those two because of rule number 14? 14. You are only permitted to carry up to 2 items as rewards. However, that meant these items suited the cadavermancer the best. 7-colored magic shot out from the white dagger, flying through the bodies of the corpses. The dark spiritualist hastily cast protective magic, but the 7-colored light emitted by the dagger had quite a powerful destructive force. Kwang. Although the protective magic itself did not break, the dark spiritualist was pushed back, eventually hitting the wall as she fell on one knee. At the same time, her evil spirits screamed and spread in all directions. Hi Hayek, in the end, necromancers are similar to me as well. The cadavermancer guffawed happily for some reason, gnawing on her nails. It's over once the main body gets attacked. It doesn't matter how strong the evil spirits are. Once you lose control over them, you're just an ordinary mage. Following that blow, the dark spiritualist lost control of her evil spirits. Subsequently, the evil spirits, which were rampaging around the dining hall just moments ago, flew towards the dark spiritualist to attack her. However, these damn bastards. Instead, the dark spiritualist reached out to the evil spirits flying towards her and began controlling them again. I was impressed by her sophisticated and swift magic operation. Even at 18 years old, she was still the dark spiritualist. Ayek. Seeing that, the cadavermancer stomped the ground with her foot and raised the crystal skull. This was the first time I saw that item, so I wanted to take a closer look. However, there was no time for that. Do you want to live? I set the wine glass down and walked towards the dark spiritualist before asking her. With my sudden intervention, the cadavermancer began to look alert, and Han so foolishly followed behind. What? To the irritated dark spiritualist, I reiterated my question. I am asking you if you want to live. Are you asking a necromancer about death? Of course, we are always prepared to die. It was quite an imposing answer, but her eyes said something else. Despite being a necromancer, she was also only 18 years old. Damn it! Upon meeting my gaze, the dark spiritualist tried to be honest with me, yet she still sought to preserve her pride. Thus, she simply whispered softly, "Yais." That must have been why she was struggling like this. Hearing her answer, I nodded with satisfaction. Then, tell me the other rules you know. What? The dark spiritualist replied sharply. It seemed like she would keep avoiding the issue until the end if I didn't explain it. I know that you have kept some rules hidden from us. Remember the conversation when we first met in this dining hall? Wondering if she had made any other mistake, the dark spiritualist tried to recall that conversation, but given the urgent situation, it didn't seem to come to her easily. You told me we can earn rewards by finding rules, and one of the rewards is to escape from this place. That's right. If you find the rules, you will be rewarded. And the biggest reward of all is escaping from this place. Ah, Hanso nodded understandingly. So that was the issue. When we suggested forming a team, Hanso said this. There seem to be some strange ones among the guests who are with us. What do you think? Shall we join forces just among us and escape together? He didn't say let's find the rules, but let's escape together. That meant the rules were not his priority. Something was odd. Finding rules meant escaping. So, why did Hanso differentiate between the two matters? I arrived at the answer easily. Hanso and Luaneth didn't know that finding the rules could help us escape. Only the dark spiritualist knew. That meant the dark spiritualist hadn't told us all the rules she knew. When I got to this point, the dark spiritualist shut her mouth tight. Hanso was bewildered and looked cautious. Meanwhile, the cadavermancer also seemed to have realized something was wrong and listened to our conversation with her hands down. Tisk! I clicked my tongue in annoyance upon seeing the cadavermancer behaving like that and then looked back at the dark spiritualist. I know that you did not give us all the rules that you knew. If they were just ordinary rules, I would have not cared this much. Ha! Questioning the nonsense of it all, Hanso exclaimed. Since it was starting to bother me, he should have just kept his mouth shut. The important thing is that the rule you hid is likely related to escaping from this place. I was referring back to what the dark spiritualist had said. That's right. If you find the rules, you will be rewarded. And the biggest reward of all is escaping from this place. Realizing her slip-up, the dark spiritualist lowered her head deeply. Perhaps she shared too much information with me because I was a fellow necromancer. Or probably because I was her type in the first place. I didn't know what her reason was. So, how did you know that one of the rewards is escape? What the rewards were had never been written in any place. Yet the dark spiritualist knew that rules and escape were an interdependent package. In the end, it meant that among the rules she had hidden from us, there was a clue related to escaping from this place. Tell me. When I pressed the dark spiritualist, who kept her mouth shut, she responded with tears in her eyes. Oh, you performed really well, didn't you? You did it very well. You waited until I was in a dangerous situation before suddenly appearing before me, offering to save me, but then pressuring me for information. Now, I have clearly seen your true colors. You said that you're my future apprentice, right? How could I take someone like you as my apprentice? You deliberately put my life at risk to negotiate about the rules? It is actually the opposite. Before answering the dark spiritualist, I slowly turned towards the Cadavermancer. I only pushed you to this point because I did not want to kill you for the answer. 22. Any deceased guest will leave behind the rules they knew. If it were not a desperate situation, the dark spiritualist would have never told us all the rules she knew until the very end. Since she would never open her mouth under normal circumstances, I was left with no choice but to kill her. Hence, I chose a little aggressive method to persuade the dark spiritualist because I didn't want to kill her. Oh, I could feel the dark spiritualist staring blankly at my back. The Cadavermancer's corpses began moving slowly. After all, she realized that she could find out the rules if she killed the dark spiritualist anyway. Number 30. I wondered if my sincerity would at least reach her, even a little. The dark spiritualist uttered the rule. Only the last remaining person can escape the dream demon manor. In a more intuitive manner, her response only clarified the fate that truly awaited us. Heh, hi. In the end, I was right to kill everyone. Speaking excitedly, the Cadavermancer moved the corpse more brutally. A dark mage who couldn't control souls. Since that was me now, naturally, I wouldn't be able to win against the Cadavermancer who had defeated the dark spiritualist. Hanzo hesitated as he stared at us cautiously. Meanwhile, the dark spiritualist remained silent, her mouth shut even tighter. I slowly picked up the wine glass from the table. Sigh. Then I sighed and threw it to the floor. Clank. Glass shards scattered everywhere, and the premium liquor inside spilled on the floor like blood. Are necromancers always vulgar until they die? The Cadavermancer's tone had completely changed from when we first met. She no longer spoke with honorifics. I had seen many humans change after gaining power, but this was the first time I had ever witnessed such an extreme change. Are you begging for me to save you? Will you lick the wine spilled on the floor? Ignoring the Cadavermancer's smug grin, I was focused solely on the spilled wine and glass shards. Is it not fascinating? What? The Dream Demon Manor proceeds with everything automatically, without the need for any instructions. It always returns to its original state, just like how we wash our bodies. Each word I uttered made the Cadavermancer feel eerie, and she immediately gestured to control the corpses. However, perplexed, she examined them as the corpses showed no response. What is this? What is this? Seeing the Cadavermancer screaming while wondering why her corpses were not moving, I couldn't help but scoff at her foolishness. Have you still not figured out what is going on? Even though you used rule number 24 in reverse. 24. When a guest dies, the room they occupied will be opened. However, until then, entry is forbidden even with permission from the room owner. Instead of guests, the Cadavermancer used the corpses of the guests to kill everyone in the other rooms. In other words, the already deceased guests were no longer treated as guests. How foolish of you. Boom. The clock near the entrance rang loudly to signal the end of the day. It was hard to tell because there was no daytime, but I roughly estimated that it was about time. There are no servants here. 28. There are no servants in the Dream Demon Manor. Also, meals will be replenished daily. 21. Meals will be replenished daily. Please feel free to eat as much as you like. As if the manor heard my words, the food we had eaten was refilled in the blink of an eye. It was a strange scene, like a mirage in the desert. And the shattered glass on the floor began to disappear gradually, and even the wine that had splashed all over the floor disappeared without leaving a single stain. The rules said that cleaning is performed daily. What? Cleaning? Therefore, there is no need to bother cleaning things like corpses. I could only sneer at the Cadavermancer, who was staring at her fading corpses. It is something to be thankful for. 17. Cleaning is performed daily. Chapter 203, Rule number 10. Just like a dream on a midsummer night or a mirage in the desert, the corpses disappeared into nothingness before anyone realized it. With an expression of disbelief, the cadavermancer stared blankly at where the corpses had been. Then, as if coming to her senses, she suddenly raised her head. However, crush. My mana-enhanced hand swiftly seized her thin neck. A necromancer without evil spirits and a cadavermancer without corpses. Is this not such a fitting duel? Keek. As I dragged her away, her desperate struggle to escape now looked like the pitiful tap dance of a wretched woman. She dropped the crystal skull and tried to stab my wrist with the dagger, but it seemed like she didn't have enough strength, so her efforts were in vain. Her physical strength was weak since she had sewn her body several times before, making it pretty difficult for her to pierce through my reinforced wrist. Where are you going? Hanso asked as he hastily chased behind me. I replied as I exited the dining hall and opened the first floor's entrance door. There is something I need to check. Cough, creak. The door at the entrance was opened and the outside was still buried in a pitch-black darkness. It didn't need to be said that something was hiding in that darkness, watching us. Since I first came to the Dream Demon Manor, I had been feeling this eerie sensation. Thus, I needed to test it. 2. Please refrain from going outside at night. If you happen to go out, the responsibility lies with you. Don't do it. I said don't. I felt like an animal trainer about to throw meat into a lion's den. The only difference was that the meat I was holding was still alive. But regardless, I still threw her without hesitation. Then, as if already waiting in anticipation, the shadow of monsters flew out from the darkness. Initially, screams accompanied the shattering of bones, but soon, only a squelching, slurping noise echoed from outside. I see. Rule number 2 was the most critical factor in determining whether one could leave the Dream Demon Manor immediately or not. However, I needed to confirm the meaning behind the vague statement regarding how responsibility lay with oneself. And this confirmed it. How horrifying. Hanso turned his head away, saying he couldn't watch anymore. However, given that the cadavermancer had murdered the other guests and even disrespected the deceased by using their corpses, this execution method did not seem excessive. Nevertheless, my eyes continued watching the death of the cadavermancer. As expected, she too was a soulless being. Jortu, who died first. Mull, who committed suicide right before me. And finally, this female cadavermancer. I couldn't see their souls even though they were all dead. Perhaps the other guests were the same. Ultimately, this meant, aren't you acting too hastily? At that moment, the dark spiritualist, who was exhausted from the fight with the cadavermancer, gathered herself together and stepped outside the dining hall. Don't we need to confirm the rules known by the cadavermancer? We already know the method to escape anyway. Rule number 30. Only the last remaining person can escape the Dream Demon Manor. Once we knew this, everything else was unnecessary. In fact, most of the rules were tricks made by Larrick to make the Dream Demon Manor more interesting. You were aware of rule number 30. That was why you killed Jortu without hesitation, right? When I pressed this question to the dark spiritualist, she simply turned her head and avoided answering. No wonder she killed Jortu for a ridiculous reason. What are you going to do now? Shall the three of us fight to see who wins? Humph! At the sharp retort of the dark spiritualist, Han so subtly backed away while raising his heavenly oath martial staff. No matter how loyal and affectionate he became during our time together, as a martial artist, he wouldn't have wanted to die meaninglessly in a place like this. Ignoring those two, I slowly turned my gaze to the clock on the first floor. Another day had passed. It was already the second day. If we excluded today, we only had 3 days remaining. After 5 days, everyone present here would be forcibly evicted and end up like the cadavermancer just now. Interrupting the two people who were cautious of each other, I intentionally matched the atmosphere and asked the fundamental question. What is the reason for the Dream Demon Manor's existence? The reason for its existence? Well, as if they had never thought of this, the two hesitated, unable to give a proper answer. I continued pouring out questions, one at a time, about the things that I had been thinking about until now. The manor has guests coming from different eras. Although there were plenty of treasures, mana could not be sensed. Food was created randomly, and the cleaning was done neatly. Rare and precious items like Lemegeton and the Heavenly Oath martial staff were distributed without a care, as if they were just welcome drinks. Can a place like this really exist? Shaking my head, I admitted it honestly. I consider it impossible. Neither of the two could strongly deny my statement. It was also because we were talking about the Demon Lord of Deception, Larrick. I didn't know how he did it, but I could only speculate that it might have been possible since he was a monster who had lived for hundreds of years. Moreover, My biggest concern regarding this manor is the time paradox. Time what? What are you talking about? I unintentionally used Earth's terminology. I cleared my throat and corrected my explanation. There was an old Hanso in my time. However, if I kill the young Hanso present here, what would happen to the old Hanso I knew? Ah, that part also bothered me. As I explained the concept, the dark spiritualist immediately understood and agreed. Since it wasn't such a difficult explanation for Hanso, he also pondered while stroking his chin. A time paradox was a considerably significant problem that couldn't be dismissed lightly. Since Haralhazard Luaneth, who was to invade the Griffin Kingdom, had died, the very future of the kingdom would drastically change. This would cause all of history to be altered. A situation that shook the very foundations of the game's story was unfolding. However, I was still standing here unchanged. As Deus Verdi, the Soul Whisperer. This manor has never tried to stop us despite our countless opportunities to interfere with the past. Even when I told them that Hanso died at the age of 85 and that I was the dark spiritualist's apprentice, the manor showed no reaction. This meant there were no specific rules related to it. Certainly. 2C. There were too many possibilities. This was a place that could greatly disrupt the continent's history. Thus, I couldn't help but hold some doubts. If there is a reason, I can only think of one. I put forward a simple hypothesis instead. Deaths that occur here, or any information about the future that guests have learned, will not have any impact outside the manor. At the same time, both the dark spiritualist and Hanso remained silent. The dark spiritualist twitched her eyebrow as if she had vaguely sensed it, but Hanso, who was still puzzled, tilted his head. Even if I talk about the future, it will not change the past. I ask it because regardless, we will be losing our memories after 5 days? We certainly could gloss it over like that. At first, I also thought the dark spiritualist had lost her memory after she left this place. While that might not be entirely wrong, but drawing on the fact that no souls existed here, I laid out the cruel truth. I wonder if everyone other than me, who came from the future, is fake. Booming. At the long, echoing sound of the bell, I slowly got out of bed. I had intended to briefly close my eyes to rest, but unexpectedly, I spent the night wide awake. After putting Lemigitin, which I took from the desk, back into my pocket, I headed outside my room. Although we had agreed to meet at the dining hall, Hanso was already standing in the corridor, waiting for me alone. He leaned the heavenly oath martial staff against the wall, appearing like a vigilant watchman ready for a determined battle. Have you sorted out your thoughts? How could I possibly accept that I'm not real, but a fake? Saying this, Hanso let out a bitter smile tinged with self-mocking. Come to think of it, was the reason you were particularly polite because you had met the 85-year-old me? He wasn't wrong, but if I had simply met Hanso, I wouldn't have used honorifics to this point when addressing him. It is not just because of your age. It is because I consider you a person worthy of respect. Hanso's gaze was calm and settling. There was a deep curiosity in his eyes. I was not present at that moment. Technically, it was the original Deus who was at the banquet hall at the time. But I heard that 85-year-old Hanso fought against the demons until the very end on behalf of the Han Empire. Me. With a reluctant expression, Hanso carefully dwelled over my words. Even with your aging body, you stood on the front lines against the demons. You were befitting of your title as the war god of the Han Empire until the very end. Such behavior certainly deserves respect, so I am simply being polite to you now. But am I not myself? Hanso cut me off abruptly and clenched his fist. Judging from his trembling expression as if filled with anger, I could feel how deplorable the current situation must be for him. After hearing your words, I've thought about it all day. Frankly, it is still too difficult to simply accept that I am not the real Hanso. Because it is so hard to accept, in the end, I am considering killing you and escaping. If he were to fight me now, someone who did not control any souls, Hanso could certainly gain the upper hand and secure victory easily. However, despite Hanso's declaration, I continued to silently look at him, and perhaps sensing something amiss, he lowered his gaze and asked, "Are you not going to resist?" It would not matter if I did. However, while I had considered this possibility, there was one thing I needed to firmly address. I find it difficult to accept that you are different from the Han, so I know. What do you mean? Before coming here, can you recall everything from your past? Yes, very vividly. He resolutely responded as if trying hard to deny he might be fake. However, hearing such a denial made me understand why Larrick had sent me to Dream Demon Manor in the first place. This is just my speculation, but perhaps you did indeed enter the Dream Demon Manor at exactly this age many years ago. Back then, you would have used room 110, although I do not know whether you succeeded or failed to escape. Given that no one knew what would happen 5 days later, I couldn't be sure right now. Even if the real Sir Hanso is gone, his memories and experiences from that time remain here. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been possible to create such an elaborate fake. This wasn't only the case for Hanso or the Dark Spiritualist, but everyone else behaved and moved as if they were the real person. Did the Dream Demon Manor recreate me? Similar to the already broken Lemegeton and the supposedly lost Heavenly Oath Martial Staff, I speculated that the Dream Demon Manor was capable of recreating humans from a time who no longer existed. What about the uninvited intruder? The Dark Spiritualist. In the end, she must be the same. She was an intentional device created by Lyric to manufacture some tension. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a particular need to create rule number 27. The warning and the wording used, uninvited intruder, fell under the same nature as all the other rules in the Dream Demon Manor. In the end, despite being real, I am just a fake? Is that what you mean? Two words that contradicted each other. But that was why he was a presence that fit the Dream Demon Manor perfectly. I don't know anymore. Hanso lowered his head deeply, exhaling as if to complain. The Heavenly Oath Martial Staff he had been holding was now on the ground. I will no longer determine whether I am real or fake. After this conversation with you, what difference does it make? I am simply Hanso, the war god of the Han Empire. He cast aside his complex dilemma to follow his own conviction. As you said, fighting against a great evil is probably the most fitting end for a war god like me. And that is why I, war god Hanso, will stand by your side. With a hearty laugh, Hanso patted my chest lightly. I slowly bowed my head towards him. It no longer mattered whether the man before me was real or fake. However, I only hoped that this being, who had lived his life like Hanso, would continue to do so like the real Hanso until the end. Thank you. In the end, whether it was the 85-year-old Hanso or the current one here, they both chose to fight against the Demon Lord with unwavering conviction. Wasn't he truly such a simple-hearted man? Come to think of it, maybe I came here to be persuaded by you. With a self-mocking smile, he gently pushed me from behind. You should go to the dining hall. She's waiting. Knowing about my teacher-apprentice relationship with the Dark Spiritualist, Hanso winked and stepped back. As I headed towards the dining hall, I slowly stopped and turned my body to look at Hanso. He tilted his head, asking if something was wrong. However, out of courtesy, I spoke once again. Come to think of it, I have never given you a detailed introduction about myself. Deus Verdi of North Sweden. That is all I know about you. Hanso shrugged, and I placed my hand on my chest, bowing. I am a necromancer who consoles the souls of the deceased. The name graciously bestowed upon me by King Orpheus of the Griffin Kingdom is Soul Whisperer. Soul Whisperer. Soul Whisperer Deus Verdi. A necromancer who consoles the souls of the deceased. As he repeated the words several times, he soon realized why I said this to him. He let out a forced laughter-like exclamation. Ha! So you're an expert at handling someone like me. When I didn't say anything more and simply offered a faint smile, he nodded several times before swiftly turning his body, saying, That's right, if this life is indeed heading towards its end. I'll ask you to see me off. Although there was no soul in the current Hanso, I thought that what I had done so far might still be of help to him. After leaving Hanso, who had returned to his own room, I headed back to the dining hall. As I did, I noticed a new phrase written on the wall listing the Dream Demon Manor's 10 rules. 10. Among the guests, there is only one living person. The missing part of rule number 10 was now revealed. Was figuring it out myself the condition for completing the rule? They weren't just written down, the rules were locked away like riddles. Seeing rule number 10 now made me realize that rule number 30 was also a kind of trap. So, in the end, that is what number 30 meant. 30. Only the last remaining person can escape the Dream Demon Manor. It was a cruel, final rule that encouraged a ruthless massacre. However, the true meaning of that rule wasn't for me to kill everyone to survive. It just meant that I was the only living person here. In the end, nobody else but me could escape from the Dream Demon Manor. How ridiculous! With a sneer, indicating that I would not be swayed by such things anymore, I entered the dining hall. Sitting there was the 18-year-old Dark Spiritualist who had been waiting for me. You're late. We don't have time. She seemed quite displeased, but I reassured her with a smile. There are 3 days left. We had 3 days left until we were forcibly kicked out of the Dream Demon Manor. The remaining time is quite abundant for 3 people to fight for their lives, and yet quite demanding just to unravel the mysteries of this riddle-filled place. I slowly sat down next to her. But anticipation for the time ahead brought a faint smile to my lips. It seems like a perfect time for us to have a conversation. Chapter 204. The 18-year-old Dark Spiritualist. Glasses and bottles flew towards us as I sat down. Picking up a drink, the Dark Spiritualist gestured for me to start, but I shook my head. It will be a waste if we spend this time while getting drunk. Hesitating at my words, the dark spiritualist sighed and returned the bottles and glasses to their original positions. Then, perhaps because there was nothing else to do, the dark spiritualist awkwardly broke the silence with a random question. Did Han So take it well? She didn't seem particularly curious, however. I answered the question anyway. Yes, he said as a martial artist. He would continue to fight the demon lord until the end. Once again, I felt grateful towards him, but the dark spiritualist's expression changed subtly. But is that really possible? I understand how you concluded that we are fakes, but ultimately, that means we are creations of Lyric. Just like how Lyric established the Dream Demon Manor, in the end, they, too, were Lyric's creations. Can we really stand up against Lyric? It wasn't wrong. Alright, to be honest, it is probably impossible. It was definitely impossible. The Demon Lord of Deception must have done this several times. Of the champions who stayed in room 110, many must have fallen victim to the play staged by Lyric, tricked into killing each other. However, there must have been times when those people tried to fight against the Demon Lord like we were now. In the first place, it is technically impossible to defeat Lyric now. I don't have souls I can control or the Holy Grail to use. Holy Grail. Upon hearing the words Holy Grail, the dark spiritualist looked slightly bothered. But since she said nothing, I continued. However, fortunately for us, Lyric is not a demon lord obsessed with battle. He was not someone who found amusement through battles like the Demon Lord of War, Valkyria, or the Demon Lord of Pride, Dune. Lyric actually found excitement and pleasure in deceiving and tricking others. But won't he just kill us all if we make a mistake? There was that possibility too. However, that was if Lyric was a human. What I learned during the recent battle with the Demon Lords was that they showed fanatical obsession towards their deepest desires, but they did not hold much attachment to other things. What Lyric desires is not my life. He probably just wants me to follow the script and reach the ending of the Dream Demon Manor he has prepared. So, on the contrary, we just need to give him an ending he does not want. An ending he doesn't want? I will explain that later. There was no need to explain it now, and wouldn't it be a waste of time? The dark spiritualist seemed to understand my intentions and she stopped probing further. A brief silence lingered once again. Unable to remain still, I naturally took out a black gem from my pocket and handed it to the dark spiritualist. This is Lemegeton, the object the dark spiritualist had been searching for desperately, was something I obtained as soon as I arrived at the Dream Demon Manor. Now, I knew that this, too, was not real but some sort of replica that could only be used here. The dark spiritualist reached out to Lemegeton and swallowed nervously on realizing that it resonated with her. She was now experiencing the result of having injected the blood of the girl, who received Lemegeton, into herself. So, it really exists. Even as she spoke, a bitter aftertaste tinged at the end of her words. She had finally laid her hands on the treasure she had longed for so eagerly, yet the realization that it was just an illusion left her feeling dejected. I have actually handled the real Lemegeton several times. You can consider this to be exactly the same as that. You've handled real Lemegeton? Does that mean you found it? Yes. Thanks to that, I was able to make you my teacher. She then said that she now understood why she had taken me as her apprentice in a soft voice. After taking a deep breath, I spoke up. This might sound selfish, but I have one personal request. I knew what I was about to do to the dark spiritualist, who sat by my side, would be cruel. However, could you listen to a story of mine? A story. Regardless, this was a story that I could only tell the current her right now. It is about how the connection between you and me began, starting with the gem given by the Demon Lord of Deception. Then I recounted our unexpectedly long story. Boom! The long echoes of the bell signaled the end of yet another day. My throat felt parched from speaking so much, which was uncharacteristic of me. Yet I remained seated, waiting for the dark spiritualist. She had just learned that the Lemegeton she had searched for so desperately was actually a mere tool for the Demon Lord's antics. I also informed her that she vaguely regretted walking the path of a necromancer, which she had pursued so diligently in the past. And lastly, I also told her about her own death. It must have been quite difficult for the 18-year-old dark spiritualist to accept, but I told her everything without hesitation, everything that the dark spiritualist and I had experienced. In the end, it was a story about her, who had accompanied me longer than anyone else. She was the same person, yet she was also someone else at the same time. She lowered her head until her face was hidden behind her hair. It was a lot for her to process. She could resent herself for dying so meaninglessly or even get angry at me for revealing such a cruel story so casually. Why? As I considered these various possibilities, what she displayed was the determination not to retreat, despite the subdued and gloomy emotions that lay low. Why did you tell me that? It was a valid question. There was no need to tell such a cruel truth to the current dark spiritualist. It would have been better to lie vaguely and tell her that she was unexpectedly doing well. However, because it was necessary, only then would you tell me about yourself. In order to be able to hear about the dark spiritualist, it was necessary for me to reveal my connection to her through these stories. Clearly displeased with my answer, the dark spiritualist clenched her fist and slammed the table. The impact was big enough to make the surrounding tableware and food rattle. The purple mana in her hand flickered like flames. So why was that necessary? For what reason do you want to hear my story? The dark spiritualist had already predicted my response. Her eyes reddened. Her breath was stifled with heavy emotions. Everything showed how much she was suffering at the moment, but I closed my eyes and answered her calmly. To understand the parts of the dark spiritualist that remain hidden from me. Knowing that I wasn't referring to herself when I mentioned the dark spiritualist here, the 18-year-old dark spiritualist was enraged and gritted her teeth. Do you just think of me as a tool? Just to use me? Isn't this your way of exploiting me to understand the real dark spiritualist you're talking about? She hit the bullseye. Therefore, I did not deny it. It is not wrong. The dark spiritualist I knew often showed signs of wavering. There were times when she would look doubtful while observing me practice necromancy, disappearing for days before returning quietly. That got me worried. What if one day, she suddenly disappeared forever just like that? I want to understand more about the dark spiritualist that I do not know through you. If we want to quibble over this, in the end, that woman too is just like me. After all, she is also someone who is destined to disappear. Certainly, they definitely had something in common. The 18-year-old dark spiritualist who could only exist in the dream demon manner, and the dark spiritualist who would one day close her eyes and find eternal rest. However, that is the exact reason. What? On the day the dark spiritualist closes her eyes to find eternal rest, I want to be able to comfort her and give her a proper farewell. That is why I need to understand her. The necromancy shown by the 18-year-old dark spiritualist and what I knew from my dark spiritualist were completely different. A cruel aspect of her who simply used souls as tools. A ruthless female mage who took lives aggressively. The dark spiritualist buried this past of hers deeply, to prevent me from finding out, but despite that cowardly move, I intended to uncover her secret in this manner. And this is also a way for me to remember you. The reason I was this cruel to her was to give meaning to her futile life, which only existed in the dream demon manner, akin to Cinderella's glass slipper with a limited time. I will not let you become a meaningless existence destined to disappear along with this place. Aharg. This is the only memorial I can give you. At some point, tears began to flow uncontrollably from the dark spiritualist's eyes as she covered them with both hands. She acted as if she had to endure such cruelty and lay everything bare for the sake of the dark spiritualist I knew. I also spoke as if she had to sacrifice herself for the sake of the real dark spiritualist. In a way, you could say that I was a cruel man. However, as the soul whisperer, there was nothing else I could do for the 18-year-old dark spiritualist in front of me. She would disappear regardless. Yet, she had to at least leave a trace of herself. Just like Hanso, who chose to die as the war god. I wished that the dark spiritualist would also close her eyes in that manner. You son of a bitch. I did not deny that it was an act that would make her resent me. I didn't want that kind of thing. I knew that it was selfish of me to claim to act for the sake of the dark spiritualist. The current me influencing the future me. Is that the only meaning of my existence? My significance? Apart from that, I was sorry that there was nothing else I could do for her. Do you think just something like that will comfort me? Asking me to leave a trace? The dark spiritualist crouched down slowly as her tears continued to flow. Despite various emotions rising from her trembling shoulders, her tears did not cease. Nevertheless, she forcibly held back the sobbing voice and glared at me. You! The dark spiritualist swallowed her breath. I really hate you, Deus Verdi. She then spewed her resentment towards me. I hate you for telling me such a cruel truth. I hate you. That the value of my existence will end with just that. I didn't want to know that. However, other than this, the 18-year-old dark spiritualist could leave nothing else behind for the world outside. It was not enough for me to simply bury the memory of her within my heart. If this girl had some influence on the real dark spiritualist, I wondered if the 18-year-old girl before me would remain within the real one until the very end. You cold-hearted bastard. Even if it hurts, I still want to give you a chance. Not just disappearing pointlessly, but having the opportunity to leave something behind as the 18-year-old dark spiritualist. Because to me, you also are the dark spiritualist. Damn it. She struggled with her resentment towards me and the agony of discovering the truth for a little longer. However, even if it was truly just a little bit, eventually, after all, her feelings of resentment were laid bare. Please, Can you do me this favor? Only a handful of sincerity from a girl grateful for being remembered would remain. Chapter 205, Time for Farewell. I speak formally? Yes. Me? Really? I can't believe it. When I told her that her way of speaking was completely different from what it was now, the dark spiritualist laughed incredulously. After hearing many stories from her, we were now engaging in trivial small talk. Why is that, huh? How did it happen? I too am curious about that. Although both dark spiritualists had a similar lighthearted tone, the future one did not feel as frivolous as now. Talking to the current 18-year-old dark spiritualist felt like dealing with a student who had problems concentrating in class. I really wonder why. This is fascinating. She shrugged and didn't seem to dwell on the topic much. The cause is probably nothing important. Is that so? Probably. I think that change is probably because I've been holed up in the lab alone. When I wondered if such a thing could change one's manner of speaking, the dark spiritualist glanced around for no reason, mumbling. You know, when you're alone, you sometimes start talking to objects. It was quite absurd, but it must have been similar to how a man who was stranded on a deserted island named a volleyball that drifted with him, Wilson one. Wouldn't it have been solved if you started conversing with the spirits of the deceased? Those that you controlled. Though I understood why, I was still genuinely curious. It was a natural question for me since, in my case, the dead often sought me to talk, saying the things they wanted to say even if I didn't want to hear it. However, the dark spiritualist lifted her head, seemingly surprised that she hadn't thought of it. Is that so? It was also a clear sign that she viewed souls merely as tools for using magic. But I didn't hide my bitter feelings, and even advised her. They were once living people too. They're dead now anyways. She wasn't wrong. The boundary between the dead and the living must be clear and distinct. One shouldn't cross that line recklessly. But that does not mean all their rights have been stripped away. It is good to show the minimum respect to those who have reached the end of their journey. I don't understand why you have to do that. The dark spiritualist candidly shared her thoughts. They're just souls. Regardless, most of the ones I deal with are those with strong energy, those that wander around because they can't resolve their grudges. She also added that, unlike me, those were the only souls she could see. Well, honestly, I don't really care if they harm the living or not. It's kind of ridiculous for me to say this, but evil spirits were originally bad people, weren't they? Yes, those who have crossed the boundary of life and still haven't gone to rest, but remain to torment the living, are indeed evil spirits. However, anyone can become an evil spirit. Those with intense resentment and hatred can become evil spirits. And usually, such people have unjust stories. What do you mean? Are you saying that we should let them go? No, souls that have already caused harm to the living must pay the price. However, that doesn't mean we should see them as mere tools. Anyone can become an evil spirit, everyone eventually dies. They simply reached the end of their lives a bit earlier than us. I had a clear line within myself. The living came before the dead. After having seen countless souls, I could understand this concept even better. Having seen many deaths, I knew the weight of life. Unfortunately, the hierarchy is clear. But although the living come before the dead, I knew it was a cruel statement and some might call it unfair. But this was the conclusion I reached. That does not mean we should handle the dead carelessly as we wish. Because, after all, we will eventually cross that boundary someday. Someday we would all die. So I had judged and decided, even while it might feel unfair to the dead, that the living will always come first. As someone bearing the title of Soul Whisperer, it feels wrong to say this. The dark spiritualist responded with a subtle expression. In a way, you're saying something even more cruel than I am to the evil spirits. It's like your words are firmly sealing their fate. Yes, that is not wrong. The act of comforting the dead, in the end, was about giving them eternal rest. In other words, it was making them accept their own death. If someone tells me that it is karma, in that case, then I will take responsibility for it after death. Even as I said this, someday I too would die and become a soul. And since I knew that future so well, I was able to draw such a clear distinction. This was the reason why I could so clearly define the hierarchy between the living and the dead. Well, I think I understand a bit. You are walking in the complete opposite direction from me. And unfortunately, between us, it seems like you are the right one. She let out a bitter smile. But surprisingly, there was a sense of relief in her expression. Are you pitying me? I dedicated my whole life to necromancy. But in the end, I was actually on the wrong path and even died miserably. It would be an insult to pity you. Who could dare to feel sorry for someone who had devoted herself to her path? Even Demon Lord Megan called the dark spiritualist, who gave up her humanity to become a necromancer, a great woman. Yes, that's right. Her violet eyes, reflecting the dining hall's lights, held both sorrow and joy. sorrow for realizing her path was wrong. So use me as a lesson and continue walking your own path, and joy for being able to show her apprentice the right path. To the 18-year-old dark spiritualist who held both of these emotions right now, I slowly reached out and patted her head. What are you doing? She tried to push my hand away in embarrassment, but there was no real strength in her effort to do so. Although I would never say this to you outside, because saying something like this would only put her head in the clouds, I felt I should express my true feelings to her. Thank you for your teachings. The corners of my mouth gently lifted. Realizing I was smiling at her, I slowly withdrew my hand from her head. With tears welling in her eyes, she looked as if she wanted to say something. 5 minutes left. Even though Hanso was waiting for us outside, his voice echoed into the dining hall. It was our last day in the Dream Demon Manor. The time for us to part had come. Fufu, the demon lord of deception. With a snort, Larrick clasped his hands on the desk. Having just finished dealing with another customer in the darkened general store, he wore a cheerful smile on his lips. Watching humans give up something precious for their immediate desires always brought Larrick unbearable joy. The same was true for the prince of the German kingdom, who had just left. Unable to see what he held in his hands, he only focused on what he lacked, which led to making a foolish transaction. If only humans had eyes on their hands, they would be so much less foolish than they are now. Those who didn't know the value of what they had were so greedy that they recklessly always desired something new. They were indeed such a silly species. How could he not love humans when they always acted like this? If any demon lord tried to exterminate humanity, Larrick would be the first to stand in their way. Hee-hey. Larrick slowly stood up and looked around the general store. When the door first appeared in his abode and a general store appeared behind it, he was initially bewildered, but he now saw it as a kind of divine revelation. The general store he acquired after killing the dwarf-like human inside had brought him more joy than he had expected. Was his name Claire? This was not a place that someone like Claire should have possessed. It was a deformed establishment that distorted dimensions, even capable of hiding itself from the gaze of the gods. How could such a place exist? Larrick was very fond of the general store, and what delighted him the most was that it allowed him to learn the continent's secrets. The second round. Knowing that the continent had already been once destroyed and restarted, Larrick felt an overwhelming sense of ecstasy. Didn't this mean that even the gods were now deceiving everyone on the continent? As the demon lord of deception, he wanted to uncover the irresistible pleasure known as truth. And, for the sake of that, he sent Deus Verdi, specifically Kim Shin-woo, to the Dream Demon Manor. It must be over by now. Staying 5 days in the Dream Demon Manor equated to a month in the outside world. Starting at the academy, an uproar ensued as they searched for Deus Verdi, but he wouldn't know what was happening in the outside world. Larrick hummed a tune, thinking of this as another amusement and gift he had prepared for him. The Dream Demon Manor was a place Larrick created entirely from his greed. That place was made to deceive, trick, and fool countless humans. Many rules were ultimately written to toy with humans, inciting them to suspect and fight each other. However, the Dream Demon Manor was a place where only one person was real. If it were a hotel, it had just one single room. After every human staying in room 110 was manipulated for his own amusement, their memories and experiences would eventually become part of the Dream Demon Manor. Hence, all guests staying in room 110 would face the same fate. They either died along the way or were expelled after 5 days, losing all memory of their time within the Dream Demon Manor. It didn't really matter, as long as Deus' memories and experiences remain in the Dream Demon Manor. That way, he wouldn't need the real Deus anymore because an identical fake, along with memories of the second round, the truths he knew about the continent, and even more, would fall into his hands. Larrick's tongue couldn't stay still at the thought of devouring Deus' memories and experiences. Unable to stay still at the thought of that, Larrick sprang up from his seat. It's time. Exactly 5 days had passed, and it was now time for the end. Those who survived would have been expelled from the Dream Demon Manor by now. To confirm this, he opened the general store's door and headed to the Dream Demon Manor. The surrounding darkness was still poised to devour any entities trying to escape the Dream Demon Manor. The Cadavermancer. Finding the Cadavermancer's cold corpse among the darkness, he chuckled. Although she would typically be eliminated early on, the Cadavermancer became one of the more interesting characters during the middle stage of the Dream Demon Manor. She would become explosively aggressive once she got lucky and acquired a corpse. But seeing that the Cadavermancer was the only one expelled, was she the final victor this time? Larrick surveyed the inside of the Dream Demon Manor from the outside. Room 101, 102, 103, 104 deceased. Room 105 is... Room 105. Hanso was nowhere to be seen. Larrick couldn't find his corpse either. Rooms 106, 107, 108, 109 deceased. Room 110. Laric's eyes widened as he checked the subsequent numbers. Room 110, Deus Verdi. Upon sensing something amiss, he gritted his teeth. And unsure of the situation, he knew he needed to confirm it. Bang. He flung open the door to the Dream Demon Manor and stepped inside, scanning his surroundings. The corpses controlled by the Cadavermancer immediately caught his eye, but the number didn't match. Hanso, the Dark Spiritualist, and Deus Verdi. 3 bodies were missing. If they were alive, they should have been expelled from the mansion. That was the rule of the Dream Demon Manor. Did they escape? From here, the Dream Demon Manor? No, that was impossible. It was absolutely impossible. Because, aside from Deus Verdi, everyone else was nothing more than illusions created by this place. The moment they left the entrance, the darkness waiting outside would have devoured them. What the hell is going on? Normally, he would have known where they were if they were hiding inside the Dream Demon Manor. However, at that moment, step, step. Footsteps echoed from the stairs. It was more than a single pair. Feeling the mana resonating from the 3rd floor, Laric's face turned dumbfounded. As they descended to the 2nd floor, he quickly realized how the 3 managed to surpass the absolute 5-day rule of the Dream Demon Manor. How dare they? Then, as they reached the last flight of stairs, Laric gritted his teeth and glared at the 3 figures descending to the 1st floor. At the expression of the Demon Lord, that is quite a look. Deus held back his laughter. 1. This is a reference to Castaway, a Tom Hanks movie from 2000. Chapter 206. Escape. That is quite a look. I was unable to hold back my laughter as I watched Laric twist his mouth. I shrugged off the robe draped over my shoulders simultaneously. Aegis robe. Laric muttered the name of the robe as he observed me. Although it had a limit of 10 minutes, it was an item that could block any type of damage during that period. It was one of the fake treasures created by the Dream Demon Manor. So, I see that you've been to the 4th floor. It seemed like he was struggling to suppress his rising emotions from his manner of speaking. So I responded calmly. Yes, what I employed was a very simple trick, more like a play on words. For guests are only permitted up to the 3rd floor. It was puzzling at first. Since we were only allowed to go up to the 3rd floor, I naturally assumed there would be some sort of penalty for going to the 4th floor. However, there was no penalty whatsoever. And while it was not prohibited explicitly, 2. Please refrain from going outside at night. If you happen to go out, the responsibility lies with you. Just like rule number 2, it was basically just a warning to not go beyond the 3rd floor. I found it peculiar, but when I discovered the rule on the 4th floor, I realized. 29. There is no 4th floor in the Dream Demon Manor. The fact that there is no 4th floor in the Dream Demon Manor means that the 4th floor we went to was not part of the Dream Demon Manor. Since the 4th floor is beyond the Dream Demon Manor's domain, the persistent rules of this place do not apply to it. The 4th floor was not part of the Dream Demon Manor, hence the rules did not apply there. Laric took a deep breath and calmed his emotions before smiling. So, you went up to the 4th floor and escaped from the Dream Demon Manor at the stroke of midnight on the 5th day, before being expelled. Then, using the Aegis robe, you survived the dangerous 4th floor. Yes, you are pretty clever. Even though he said that, Laric's smile remained stiff. I guessed that the most crucial condition needed to copy someone was for them to lose their memory when expelled. However, since I wasn't expelled nor did I lose my memory, it meant that he had failed to copy me. Ha ha ha. Perhaps because he had been excited about uncovering the continent's secrets I held, Laric was barely able to maintain his composure. Just like a child who had just received a gift only to have it taken away, it seemed that he had realized his failure and was immediately filled with raging anger. His hand twitched, as if he wanted to break my neck right then and there for humiliating him like this. He licked his lips, perhaps driven by the impulse to drench himself in my blood. However, he wouldn't be able to do so. The moment he killed me, he would be even further from the secrets of the continent he was desperately looking forward to. Fine. I'll admit that you outsmarted me. You exploited something I overlooked. Having reached that conclusion, Laric was on the verge of losing his mind, but he acknowledged it rather calmly. So, what do you want? He gave me a twisted sneer. Your stay in the Dream Demon Manor has come to an end, but I never said that you could escape from here. Yes, it is a pity. It's really unfortunate that I was unable to get your memories. But there are plenty of other ways, and opportunities abound. I see no reason for me to allow you to leave this place. Laric smiled widely, having regained his own pace. The Dark Spiritualist and Hanso on either side of me frowned, but they did not intervene because we had expected this reaction. There is still one thing that bothers me. Seeing Laric's twisted smile with faint satisfaction, I pointed out the puzzling aspect. What is it? Perhaps having blurted out the question out of sheer anxiety, Larrick immediately covered his mouth with his hand after saying that. Why did you create the fourth floor? The moment he heard my question, Larrick stood stiff, and our eyes met. I wondered what he felt right then. Did he feel like his very essence as the demon lord of deception was laid bare? Or did he feel like his existence seemed insignificant? Larrick hesitated to speak, perhaps afraid that he would reveal the truth if he said anything further. Unfortunately, I pierced through the shield of silence and walked towards the truth. No matter how much I think about it, the existence of the fourth floor itself is strange. It ignores all the rules of the Dream Demon Manor. It was a place where the rules weren't applicable. It also contradicted various rules of the Dream Demon Manor. 17. Cleaning is performed daily. Despite the upcoming cleaning, it still insisted on devouring Jorta's corpse. 28. There are no servants in the Dream Demon Manor. It even went as far as to pretend to be the non-existent servants of the Dream Demon Manor. 29. There is no fourth floor in the Dream Demon Manor. The Dream Demon Manor itself denied its existence outright. Because of the existence of the fourth floor, there are too many loopholes in the Dream Demon Manor. That was why it was pretty simple to use the fourth floor to bypass the last 5 days rule. I just added it as an element of fun for my amusement. Larrick answered with a grin. However, if you are truly the demon lord of deception, I scoffed and rebuked him. You should have learned to lie better. Why was that? Certainly, the demon lord in front of me could kill me at any moment. He could brutally sever my neck, drink my blood, and hang my skinned corpse to decorate his general store. Yet strangely, I felt as though he was in the palm of my hand, and perhaps I wasn't the only one who felt this way. You did well by putting rules on the fourth floor. Thanks to that, it did seem like it was part of the Dream Demon Manor. The rules number 27 and number 29 were deliberately inscribed on the fourth floor. But your excuse is that it was just for fun? That is so absurd that it's not even laughable. Larrick's lame excuse to ridiculously continue the conversation only made me more certain. In my opinion, I slowly reveal the truth that the creator of the Dream Demon Manor wanted to hide desperately. The reason why the Dream Demon Manor, which had been in operation for so long, could no longer function. You did not create the fourth floor. To be more precise, it wasn't a fourth floor but a living entity. While it looked like something grand and enormous, waiting for its prey with its mouth wide open, from a slightly different perspective, it seemed to be devouring the Dream Demon Manor. Romulus, Rumble. As if reacting to its name or perhaps realizing the owner of the manor had returned, the Dream Demon Manor began trembling. Simultaneously, Larrick's face twisted grotesquely. The fanatic Mull from room 109 said this about the fourth floor. How dare he try to embody a god? He is truly blasphemous. I will surely kill Demon Lord Larrick. At first, I also thought he was just talking about a sculpture. However, in the first place, there was no way something like that would exist on the fourth floor. The answer was clear. That must be the god he was referring to. As if it had been waiting for this moment, Romulus began to devour the Dream Demon Manor violently. Its human-shaped tentacles began descending the stairs as the third floor gradually disappeared. They looked so disgusting while coming down. We'll hold them off. Bang, bang. Hanso and the Dark Spiritualist blocked the stairs to buy some time. However, Larrick didn't even glance at them and kept his eyes fixed on me. Did Mull call that monster a fake after seeing it? Yes. So ridiculous. How can someone call himself a prophet when he can't even recognize if the god they serve has come? Unlike his usual self, Larrick was now sneering with contempt. He sighed deeply and nodded. The one who occupied room 110 before you, so after I allowed that fanatic Mull to stay in the Dream Demon Manor, that monster bared its teeth here. It was like a conqueror. If it weren't for that damned fanatic, the Dream Demon Manor could have lasted forever. Human-shaped tentacles began to destroy the Dream Demon Manor. The second floor was already half devoured. The grotesque maw of a god now occupied the place where the ceiling previously was. I wondered why it had stopped its activities. It turns out that damned god was waiting for me. The Dream Demon Manor was now disappearing in the same ridiculous and futile manner its name suggested. Larrick, the owner of this place, clicked his tongue in amusement. Then he pondered over the current situation. In the end, I was unable to uncover your secret, and I also lost the Dream Demon Manor I created with so much effort. I guess you could call it karma. Do demons even have karma? Initially, it would have been more than enough to trap me in the Dream Demon Manor, but if I stayed for any longer, I would be devoured by the god. If you had been a little less intriguing or perhaps a little less mysterious, I would have given up immediately. Despite his disappointment, the demon locked his eyes on me as if I were a tempting fruit. Having experienced it from Megan once before, I had become familiar with this gaze. And in the end, creak, behind his back, congratulations, Deus Verdi, purple door opened. You are the only human to successfully escape the Dream Demon Manor on your own. Larrick admitted his defeat honestly, as if it was meaningless to keep me here for any longer. Crushing and trampling one with brute force was not in Larrick's nature. I will pay you back for today's humiliating defeat the next time we meet. With those words, Larrick quietly stepped aside, making way for me. Room blearily, as if realizing that we were about to escape from this, Romulus increased its pace and began to devour the Dream Demon Manor even more intensely. Despite the increasing urgency of the situation, I turned around and looked at the two people fighting on the stairs. And as if they were right on cue, Hanzo and the Dark Spiritualist were also looking at me. I am proud to entrust the future to you, who recognized me as a person, as Hanzo. Hanzo spoke as he swung his heavenly oath martial staff. His lips still bore a radiant smile despite his looming death. It seems I can only either greatly like or dislike you as a person. From the other side, the Dark Spiritualist expressed her honest feelings while wielding her magic. Although the time spent was brief, we had shared a lot of conversations. I would be lying if I said I didn't have any regrets. I had long abandoned having relationships with people, but you made me feel regretful at our parting, and I hate you for that. I envy my future self who will be able to stay by your side. Boom. The Dark Spiritualist's mana surged. The purple mana protected me as it tore apart all the tentacles flying toward me. I feel so upset with my other self who you'll get to meet now, that I want to hit her just once. You know? It was an abrupt yet light-hearted remark. However, her following words were anything but that. Jenny. Even though she was feeling shy, her eyes didn't waver as she tried her best to remember as much of me as she could. That's my name. Jenny. Yeah, it's strange for a necromancer to have the name Jenny. Isn't it? It sounds weak and doesn't seem fitting, right? That is a ridiculous reason. I wasn't expecting to learn of her real name like this, nor did I expect that to be her reason for hiding it. However, Jenny responded with a smile. Go and give her a good smack in my stead. Well, if that is what you want. I nodded and turned around once again. The Dream Demon Manor collapsed. The impending farewell was much heavier than I had anticipated, making it harder for me to move my feet. However, grateful that I would remember them, their backs urged me to leave. Hence, I gained a bit of strength and stepped out the door. Well done, Soul Whisperer of North Sweden. Goodbye, my good apprentice. Thud. Just like that, the door behind me closed. And suddenly, I was once again standing in my laboratory at Loburn Academy. Chapter 207, 1 month. Having finally stepped outside the manor and breathing in the laboratory's air, the sensation of escaping from that place began to feel real. True to its name, leaving the Dream Demon Manor felt like waking from a long, vivid dream. My first move was to go outside the laboratory and look for people. Seeing that the sun was shining brightly outside the window, it was probably not yet lunchtime. The weather has turned warmer than I thought. When I entered Dream Demon Manor, it was late January. Back then, there was a fierce last cold snap, but now it was not as cold as it was then. Could it be? Ignoring the rising anxiety I was feeling, just as I was about to step outside, creak. So I submitted an inquiry to Clarence City Hall for now, just in case. Well done. I'm also reaching out to some contacts I know. The laboratory door opened and in came Owen, the pianist boy, and a disheveled pink-haired woman, Professor Felpetra. Even though only 5 days had passed, seeing them evoked a feeling of warm joy in my heart. Long time no see. I calmly greeted the two. Ha! Ha! They both responded in exactly the same way. Professor Felpetra dropped the bread in her hand, which she probably had intended to eat as a lunch substitute. On top of that, Owen's music book, which he always carried with him, had also fallen to the floor. And then, Soul Whisperer, Professor Diasis. The two jumped towards me just like that. I would have fallen over if I hadn't strengthened my thighs and soles with mana before their tackle reached me. Looking down at the two people who tightly embraced me, I furrowed my brow. What are you both doing? Judging from their reactions, I realized that it had been longer than just a few days. Although I appreciated their joy upon seeing me again, I didn't like skin contact like this. Wow, it really is the Soul Whisperer. Look at that scary expression, that scary manner of speaking, this bone-chilling voice. It really is Professor Deus. Whoa, you've finally returned. However, despite seeing my displeased reaction, they seemed to be celebrating even more as they jumped around excitedly. It seemed like they needed some time to calm down. 1 month. Regardless if it was a long or short time while I was in the Dream Demon Manor, the end of January had turned into late February, marking the gradual departure of the cold weather. Even until the end, I still dislike him. It was a moment when the emotional discord I felt towards the demon named Larrick deepened once again when I thought about this matter. No matter how much time seemed to pass in dreams, only a short time had actually elapsed in reality. But the 5 days I spent there had passed by so fleetingly. SSO, everyone made a ruckus to find you, Soul Whisperer. That's right. Even Professor Erica returned to her hometown. A deep sigh escaped from my lips. Fortunately, the academy was still in the middle of its winter vacation. However, at the same time, an individual who seemed very likely to make quite an extreme choice came to mind. What about Findinay? I couldn't help but worry about what she might have done during my absence. It wasn't Findinay I was particularly concerned about, but the innocent people who might be at her mercy. The two who were answering me promptly until just now couldn't immediately respond this time. Were there any problems? Could something really have happened to Findinay? Anxiety started creeping up inside my chest. Finally, Professor Fell opened her mouth under my urgent gaze. Professor, I think it would be better to listen calmly for a moment. Isn't Sir Soul Whisperer always calm? Owen interjected from the side. And because of that, Professor Fell scratched the back of her head and took a deep breath to calm herself. Hafsu, a lot has happened during the month when Professor Deus disappeared. According to the game's flow, there shouldn't be any major threats during this vacation time. However, the continent was already moving on a completely different course from the game. I wondered if Dante had taken action, knowing that I was absent. However, what Professor Fell recounted to me was a very unexpected story. Someone claiming to be the real Soul Whisperer has appeared. The real Soul Whisperer? This time I needed to pause and carefully consider my words. So, someone else was referring to himself as the Soul Whisperer? They said Professor Deus used black magic to show false illusions of souls being comforted. She warily glanced at me while swallowing her saliva. However, Fell then kept speaking when I gestured with my eyes for her to continue. He claims to be someone who can truly heal souls and guide them to the gods. That is ridiculous. For the dead, there was only eternal rest or annihilation. Nothing more. Perhaps there were such things as heaven or hell, or the 6 paths of reincarnation. 1. But while I couldn't be sure about this in my previous world, I could definitely assert that at least there was nothing like that in this continent. However, to claim to be capable of guiding souls to the gods. A fraud, I reckon. At first, it seemed somewhat interesting, but I began to think, to an amusing degree, that they were just ordinary folks. Such people usually end up tripping over their own feet. However, looking at the expressions of both Fell and Owen, it wasn't a problem to dismiss lightly. Actually, there's talk among the kingdom's people about appointing him as the new Soul Whisperer. They even protesting. If you go out to the city, there are banners all over. They wanted to replace me, who was chosen directly by King Orpheus, with someone else as Soul Whisperer. Could be seen as a direct challenge to the king's authority. However, it must be because of my absence. The correct answer came out with a sigh. Ultimately, they were only able to be this active because I wasn't there. He provoked people as a method to encourage them, by having them come out and voice their criticisms or rebuttals against you, Professor. Also, since I was absent, it naturally made it seem like I was fleeing. It was just bad timing. Bad luck. Although Owen said this with an exaggerated reaction, in the end, could this really be dismissed and passed off as bad luck? Since this person knew I wasn't present, or more precisely, I wondered if he had been stirring up this radical behavior because he knew that I was in the Dream Demon Manor. At the same time, the name of a man came to mind. Could the man who calls himself Soul Whisperer be named Mull? The culprit who stayed in room 109 and summoned Romulus, who had devoured the Dream Demon Manor. The man who committed suicide right after telling me that we would meet again outside. At my question, both of them were visibly startled and vigorously exclaimed. Yes, that's right. How did you know? Huff. That was what I would want to ask myself as well. The Mull in the Dream Demon Manor was a fake. However, he acted as if he knew he was fake. I didn't know what trickery he employed there. However, it seemed like I had come to stand in stark contrast with quite a bothersome existence. Even within the religious circles, they are supporting that side. After all, they have been feeling uncomfortable around you, Professor. Also, that fraud allegedly acted in the name of God. Certainly, in religious circles, they must have supported Mull as being the true Soul Whisperer. At least the Saintess said it was a hasty judgment and stopped them. Lucia did so? Various thoughts came to mind, but anyway, I needed to steer the conversation back to the original topic, where Findinay had disappeared to. The answer naturally came out. Could it be? As I clenched my fists and stared at the two, Professor Fell quickly spoke while avoiding eye contact. The timing is just too perfect, isn't it? Those motherfuckers must have done something to Master Bastard. She then left after shouting like that. Huff! Professor Fell seemed to tremble as she was not accustomed to letting out such harsh words from her mouth. However, it didn't end there. Owen then proceeded to add more information. People from the Verdi household in North Sweden are also moving along with her. They're all very angry. Darius and Dia? I understood their sentiments. I was grateful for that. However, everything has become so chaotic. It was indeed chaotic. Shesh was about to split someone's head open. She said she'd find out even if she didn't know, and wildly wielded her axe. Pretending to swing an axe around with both hands, Professor Fell mimicked the way Findene had caused a commotion in the laboratory before. All right, I get it. I had heard enough information. For now, I needed to contact the royal palace and inform them of my return. I will go to the dean's office. There was a method of communication with royalty there. The two wore expressions that showed they were curious about where I had been all this time. However, understanding that handling this matter was more pressing, they didn't question me further. I then left the two in the laboratory. Amidst the spring breeze coming through the window into the empty corridor. At the end of the corridor, dressed in a black robe, I locked eyes with a woman's purple irises. Her appearance, covered with a semi-transparent black veil below her eyes, remained unchanged. However, compared to when she was 18, she clearly exhibited a more mature demeanor now, evident from her physique and vibe. Deus. Startled, she called my name in a flurry and immediately rushed over. You're not dead, right? You didn't go into eternal rest? You're alive, right? Yes. Watching her make a big fuss, I couldn't help but form a gentle smile. I wanted to say I was glad to see her, but the words wouldn't come out properly. Deuce. In my own way, I welcomed the dark spiritualist who was running towards me with tear-filled eyes. Long time no see, Jenny. Puac. Even though, as a soul, she could fly around, seeing her slip and fall in the corridor made me forget about the current situation. A hollow laugh escaped me. 1. Leodal Lunhui Rokudo Rinne refers to the 6 realms of existence or 6 paths of reincarnation in Buddhist cosmology. These realms depict the different states of existence into which a being can be reborn based on their karma and actions in previous lives. The 6 realms include realms of gods, demigods, humans, animals, hungry ghosts, and hell beings, representing various levels of suffering and happiness depending on one's deeds and moral conduct. In other words, it is Sasra.